Hi, love. It's just me, Emily. Welcome to my podcast where we explore how to discover your soul's purpose, embody your essence, and live a life in alignment with your truth. Today, I am joined by Jules Ferrari, who is a Sydney-based astrologer with over 10 years of experience. She received her training at the Sydney Astrology School in Australia and the Centre for Psychological Astrology in the UK. She is also a member of the Astrological Association of Great Britain. In addition to her business and doing readings for clients, she's also had the pleasure of writing the last 3 annual horoscopes for Rush magazine's summer issue. She's also created experiences and workshops for Hermès, Australia, and Canva, and has written for a range of clients, including the beautiful brand Lucy Folk. To Jules, astrology is a concoction of some of her greatest loves: symbolism, mythology, archetypes, Jungian psychology, writing, and astronomy. Welcome, Jules, to the show. So Jules and I are laughing because it is Mercury retrograde still, and we're having some technical issues, but actually, what is Mercury retrograde? Because it has such a bad rep. I'd love to hear your interpretation of this time.
Yeah, it's so from the Earth's perspective, as we move around the sun and Mercury is in front of us, as it's like an optical illusion, basically. But as the Earth goes around the arc of the sun, it looks like Mercury is moving backwards. So it's obviously never moving backwards. They're all working clockwise, all of the planets in this solar system. However, from Earth's perspective, it appears to move backwards. And again, over millennia, there's been this mapping of when this occurs, there can be these kind of communication breakdowns. Things can break. Some astrologers say not to sign contracts. I don't really suggest any of those things, but other than knowing it is this time period, so maybe allow more time for travel, let's say, or just be more conscious if you are engaging in any kind of like written or contractual things. But yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like for me, there's always something that comes up. But yeah, Mercury retrograde seems to get a bad rep. So Jules, how did you personally find your way into astrology?
I had a reading when I was in my Saturn return, and I'd always been obsessed with the planets. I had a big book on the planets when I was a kid, and my dad had this classical piece by Horst where he had songs for each of the planets. And I used to listen to that while looking at the pictures. And it just seemed mysterious and amazing to me, like space. And then when I had this reading, the astrologer just completely, for want of a better word, she just nailed me. And I was so immediately curious and wanted to learn and understand this language or this system that was able to, bring me so much clarity and I guess validation that I am me. And that is the main thing that I hear from my clients as well. It's like this, almost like this warm hug of, yes, you are who you are. It's not a mistake. And it's here in this map. It's here in this map that was created the second that you appeared on this planet. It's mind blowing, it's mysterious, and all those things are deeply important to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel the same way when I got my birth chart read. I was like, oh my gosh, I am exactly who I thought I am, but I think we live in this society where we really compare ourselves, or there's kind of an image of what we think we should be. So when we go in and get our birth chart read, it is just this like relief of like, oh, like that's why I'm more I don't know, like inhibited or more or for me it's more like that's why sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Like that's why I'm like really social, or that's why I have these fantasies about speaking up on stage because that's my Leo. And, instead of just saying, oh, that's silly, but to actually tap in and like trust that that vision and that desire within you is actually meant for you. So yeah, that's what I love astrology, and I've had a similar, it's had a similar impact on my life. What is the difference between the natal chart and then a transit?
So your natal chart is determined as soon as you arrive here. It's a map of the solar system from the specific perspective of where on Earth you arrived, and the time location that you arrived into, let's say. And then, so you always have your natal chart. It's your birth chart. And then the transits is the sky now, the solar system now, and how that is interfacing with your natal chart. So for example, with the Mercury retrograde, I was born during a Mercury retrograde. So for me, something that I've mapped since being an astrologer is that this is often a very creative time for me, Mercury retrogrades. I don't buy into the popular culture expression of it, let's say. For me, it's always a very fertile time. And it also, for those of you who are beginning to understand your own chart or starting to track your own cycles, which is where astrology can be so helpful because it is a seasonal, it maps the seasons as well. And you can start to look at or notice what months are your favorites, let's just say. And then to look at your chart and see, okay, maybe it's Scorpio season. It's late October to late November. So where is Scorpio in your natal chart? Because during that time, the sun is illuminating this archetype or this area of your life. Something that I do with my students too, even to just map what full moons are really strong for you. Because sometimes we can have a full moon and it just passes you by. You don't even notice. And then there's others where it's like personally very activating, or things really come to pass during that time. And so the transits play out for us all individually based off of our natal chart. So they're these sort of, again, collective kind of archetypal experiences. Like a Saturn return is this incredible initiation into deeper levels of self-responsibility. But how you experience your Saturn return will likely be very different to how I experienced mine, even though there's, again, these sort of underlying threads. Let's say, real life play out of them will be how it'll be individually expressed. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I love how you talk about it, that you were born in Mercury retrograde, that because of your positioning and the pattern that, that pattern's going to play out differently for you, and maybe in a really positive way. So I think that's an important takeaway too for anyone listening. Like, I think the pop astrology, as you called it, can kind of be almost too broad, and it really is so nuanced. And that's why like getting a birth chart read and getting your and looking at the transit and how that's affecting you right now can be so powerful.
And that's sort of how I feel. Sorry. I was just going to say,
no,
that's how I feel about the apps as well. I would highly recommend you get your chart read before you download one of these apps. I don't have any of these apps. I don't even recommend it because for me, I just think it's similar to this pop astrology sense. If you have one of these apps, they'll send you a text in the morning to tell you what your day is going to be like. And I just think that's programming. and astrology is so much more, like you said, nuanced. And the more you understand your chart, that's it. Astrology is a tool for self-knowledge and self-awareness.
Yeah.
Being told who you are or being told how your day is going to be really is the opposite of what astrology is about, which is self-empowerment. For me personally, it's like, yes, these apps can be interesting, or understanding ourselves is a very strong, forever human drive, I think. But you want to understand your chart is much more important than, everyone who has, let's say, their sun opposite their moon. Everyone who has that will receive the same information. But how you being born on a full moon plays out with the rest of the planets in your chart will be vastly different to the person next to you who has that same opposition, let's say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like and I don't know all the different parts, but there's like the aspects and the degrees and like the house that it's in, and then the other planets. Like, I think we have this misconception that all we really need to know is our sun sign. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of these other placements that to really pay attention to, or that can help you understand yourself more?
Yeah, I personally find all of them vital. And the sun is, our sun is a star. It's constantly on. It's constantly expressing itself. And if we think about that symbolically, knowing your sun sign by sign and house placement, which is the area of life that this energy wants to express itself, then you'll have a good sense of what are the things that bring me vitality. When I'm doing this, I feel really alive, for example. So for me, I'm a Gemini sun, but my sun's in the 9th house, which is the natural territory of Sagittarius. The 9th house is all about, why do I exist? What is existence? It's exactly, it's so much to do with like religions, philosophies, any kind of modality that works to make sense of reality. So me being an astrologer isn't that big of a leap. It's like breaking these things down and working to make meaning of things is what makes me feel so alive. Then we have our moon, which is, I would recommend everyone knows what their moon sign is, because like our moon, she has 8 different cycles, whereas the sun is always on. The moon is going through 8 different phases. She's like this chameleon that sometimes she needs to be completely withdrawn during the new moon when it's all dark. And then there's this period where she likes to be right in the spotlight. And understanding your moon, it has a lot to do with your inner world, your emotional landscape. Certainly has a lot to do with your intuition, how you hear your inner world messages. And it's a lot to do with like your domestic environment. Then we have another one that I would say is 2 more that I would say is interesting, or 3. Honestly, I could talk about it all day.
They all matter.
Yeah. Knowing your Mercury is a really good one, because we are relational beings and we're communicating with people every day. Understanding your Mercury is really vital. And for those of you who are in relationship or have children, understanding your partner or your child's Mercury is also, I would say, so helpful. Your Mercury is, how do I take in information? And then how do I communicate it? For me, I have it in Cancer. So I'm taking in the words that you're saying, but I'm also feeling the environment. I'm taking in the emotions as much as I am the words. And that could be very different to say how, for me, one example, like a partner of the past took in information, communicated in a very different way. And for pretty much the whole relationship, it felt like we were speaking different languages to each other. But understanding about it, it just helps you to, if I know how my child best receives their intel, then I can communicate to them in a way that they'll get it. So I think your Mercury is very vital. And then there's Chiron, which I love. He's one of my favorites. I always look at somebody's Chiron in a reading. It's this glyph or symbol that looks like a key in our chart. And in mythology, he's a centaur, and he used to teach combat skills to all the great heroes like Heracles, Hercules, Jason, Achilles. And then he was hit in the knee with a poison arrow and sustained this injury for the rest of his life and put a lot of his conscious attention towards trying to heal this. So he became a physician, an herbalist. He essentially learned all the healing modalities, and then that's what he taught to the gods. So it's this very experiential, let's say, wounding that we all either come here with or receive in early childhood. Wounding in quotation marks, it's like a pain point, let's say. Yeah. And it's where so much of our lessons come through. It comes through our Chiron point. And hanging out with your Chiron is so medicinal. Figuring out what is this for me, and then working to evolve your expression or your experience of it is very vital, because all of these 12 signs, which I refer to as the 12 archetypes, they have this spectrum of you either play it consciously or unconsciously. And I think we land here with the full template for each of them, but we're experiencing we're experiencing time and space. We're moving through time and space, and we're experiential creatures. And so I think most of us we sort of start in the unconscious. We can play, I don't know, I'm sure you've all had this experience where you can be conscious in something, but still play parts of it unconsciously. Totally. But I think the more that we consciously utilize these things, the better. So for example, with my 9th house sun, again, the 9th house being related to Sagittarius, the less attractive qualities of that is being very, let's say, one-eyed or dogmatic. And I have been that way in the past. It's like, oh, I'm a vegetarian. Everyone should be a vegetarian. Oh, I'm Hare Krishna. Everyone should be a Hare Krishna. It's like, but thankfully, I've had enough experiences where I pop out of that and I look and I'm like, whoa, that's so embarrassing that I just made this assumption that everyone needs to do what I do. And so one of the higher expressions of Sagittarius is non-judgment, because it's like everyone's on their path. There's a path. That's beautiful. And everyone can express themselves how they want to, rather than me needing to control the route that they take throughout their existence.
Yeah. I love that. And it reminds me of a couple other of these like tools like human design or the Enneagram, in that it's like we all have these patterns within us, and there's kind of a shadow frequency of it and a lighter frequency of it. And you could say, those both play out unconsciously or consciously. But when you when you use one of these tools and you kind of see what the pattern is, you can start to say, oh, that's just like my pattern. And then you become aware of the shadow and the light. And you're like I'll use the Leo example for me. Like Leo is invited to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to like really shine their bright light and to kind of be like that person in the spotlight, but like the shadow of that is needing the spotlight to feel love, when the light side of Leo is to like love themselves so much that they can take up that space. So just by noticing the archetype and the pattern, like I can start to check myself and be like, well, is this coming from a place of like self-love, or is this coming from a place of needing to prove? And at least it's helped me kind of release the story of like what's wrong with me, and just seeing that this is how my pattern plays out according to my divine design, essentially.
Yeah, totally. And I think the beauty of these modalities is they bring this level of, I would almost say, objectivity. You know, for
Yeah.
me, especially learning about how like overly sensitive I can be in certain arenas with my Mercury in Cancer, reading that or learning about that, I was able to do a lot more work than, you know, let's say if a partner said, "Oh, you're being so sensitive," that would make me more sensitive. But reading
Right.
it through
Yeah.
this like objective system, or people with this have a tendency to blah blah blah. It's like, oh whoa, I can see myself in that, and there's no sort of shame or
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah, sensitivity about it. It's more like this is how it is, and this is how you can utilize it,
Right.
or this is how you can.
I think that's a perfect example because, our tendency would be, to receive a comment like that from a partner, you're so sensitive. It's like our defense goes right up and we want to almost prove ourselves right. But by having this tool, this modality, you can be like, oh, that's a pattern that I have, and you get to work with it. I think the shame in inhibits so much healing. And so I love
Yes.
that. It strips that all away. It's just like, this is what it is. And it's inherent in all of us. Some people
Yeah.
are going to inhabit this quality more than others, dependent upon your birth chart and your astrology. But, yeah, it's just this like, wow, like what area can I dig into next? I wanted
Yeah.
to dig in a little bit more to Chiron, because you said something about how this could be like a childhood wound. And I'm curious, I mean, would that be the same as like the core wound? Because I think the core wound can also give us clues as to what is our life's purpose. Is that similar? And like,
Yeah.
what's the lesson that my soul is here to learn and to play out in this lifetime?
Yeah, I think Chiron's a big part of that. And then I'd say the other part is your nodal axis. So the south
Okay.
node, the nodal axis is its energy points. Essentially, it's where the moon's orbit around Earth, where that meets Earth's orbit around the sun. We have a thing, I think it's called the elliptic or the ecliptic. I can never remember. But essentially, it's like, and you can all go outside and find it tonight. It's like this line in the sky where all the planets are flush with. So that the planets are always in a line
Wow.
throughout the sky. The moon is slightly off that. But when it's flush with that is when we have our eclipses. And so wherever your south and north node are in your natal chart is where the eclipses were taking place in the year that you were born. And the south node is this energy that I find it's almost as dominant as our sun, at least kind of until our first Saturn return. And it can often be quite unconscious because we kind of formed it as a kid. We formed all of this as a kid, which is why self-inquiry is so helpful, because we can go in and look at how we're playing certain things now as adults. But
Mhm.
the north node is exactly opposite the south node. And it's this newer energy that we're moving towards over this lifetime. And often it can feel new and uncomfortable. We could almost say that our comfort zone can live within our south node. And the more that we're able to move towards that north node, I always think of it like a seesaw, like the energy stuck towards the south node. And the more that we begin to move towards the North Node, we integrate the higher expressions of the South Node through integrating the higher expressions of this North Node. So, for example, because an example might be helpful, my South Node is in the 4th house in Aquarius. The 4th house is related to home, early childhood. Aquarius, an Aquarian South Node is a natural weirdo, let's just say. One of my childhood nicknames at home was Freak. There was just something about me always different. And in that Aquarian way, I made that equal being cool. You know, it was like, it didn't become a chip on a shoulder. It became part of my armor. Was like, yeah, I'm different. But then it almost became this sense of I'm better than, which is really dangerous. And for any Aquarians listening, it's very important to look at anywhere that you might be running this program of I'm separate from you, and that's a good thing, you know, because what we need the Aquarian magic right now. These people see things because they've had this outsider perspective. They bring with them so much interesting ways of seeing or ways of living, whatever it might be. And the opposite of that is Leo. So essentially, I'm on this big journey going from my head being almost like overly cerebral and moving down to my heart, where it's like, actually, I kind of want you to know my story, even though my Aquarian South Node is like, no way, nobody gets to hear anything about me. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, there's tension there. Yeah, when we did my reading, I was in my nodal return, and so the eclipse, it was the Libra. I think there was it was the full moon in Libra, and there was also an eclipse going on. And it was, so basically the nodal return is when it's like the same placement as your birth, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, very important.
And I was feeling that tension so much as a Libra South Node, Aries North Node, Libra, all about relationships, very sociable, chameleon, get along with anyone, almost at the point of self-abandonment. And then Aries being the path of individuation. And shortly after I talked to you, Jules, I ended up breaking up with my partner because it was this tension of I can't be myself in this relationship. And it was do I choose the relationship or do I choose myself? And by having the tools of astrology, I was able to, I don't know, just feel really held in that really scary time. It was the universe was guiding me, which was really powerful. I don't know if you have any experience with just a time in your life that was hard where you really leaned on astrology, or if you have tips for anyone and how they could tune into their chart to navigate big transitions. Have you ever found yourself wondering, is there more to life than this? You followed all the steps. You found your dream job, your dream girl, maybe you even started a family, but you're still questioning, could life be more meaningful, more beautiful? Could I feel more alive? If so, then it might be time to connect with a deeper part of yourself, your soul. And luckily for you, I'm opening just a handful of one-on-one coaching spots to help you discover your soul's purpose and live a life in alignment with your truth. Because here's the issue. Many of us are living two lives. Our identity is split into two selves, the conditioned self and the true, authentic self. The conditioned self is the part of us that follows societal rules. It's easily influenced by parents, by friends, by partners, by the media, by culture, by religion, really anything outside of ourselves, and is often driven by the ego. The authentic self is the part of us that follows our soul. It's influenced by synchronicities and signs from the universe and is driven by love and serving the collective whole. My work is about helping you discover your authentic self by reconnecting you back to your soul. When you live a soul-led life and in alignment with your truth, you feel confident in your decisions because you're sure of who you are and what you're meant to do here in this lifetime. You feel in flow and at ease because you're using your God-given gifts and strengths in a way that feels good and serves the collective. It's coming from a place of love. You feel energized about life, curious about your potential, and excited about the endless possibilities that lie ahead. Life becomes deeply meaningful and profoundly magical. I know because I walked myself through this transformation just about a year ago, and now I would be so honored and grateful to help you do the same. If you're interested in exploring one-on-one soul purpose coaching with me, just book a discovery call in the link in the show notes. This is a no pressure call to simply explore if this type of work is aligned for you. Spots are filling up quickly, so don't hesitate. If you're curious, trust the calling. It's your soul.
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, for me, when I had my nodal return, because my North Node is in Leo in the 10th house, which is work, public life. So it's like being seen, but being seen for being exactly who I am, which is the thing that I would in the past have protected myself from, let's say. So for me, during that time period, that's when I essentially like came as an astrologer and started my business. And I had so many fears around people perceive me. Either they'd perceive me as being like fluffy and silly, when for me it's like, no, I'm a raging intellectual. Or, or I had a lot of fears that people would, that sort of fundamentalists would write to me and say, I don't know, that you're in the devil's work or anything. I just had whole layers of fear that I had to move through. I was being drawn towards doing this thing
Your
that I knew
soul.
I had skills in, and yeah, and so I couldn't see what the outcomes were. I mean, I tried the thing, and all astrology is, what astrology is doing is it's allowing you to see yourself outside of yourself, and it so it aids in self-trust, I think. And again, for anyone listening who might be on the precipice of a change, give yourself space to really be able to listen to yourself, because it can be a very noisy world with a lot of opinions, but the most important one in terms of your own path and trajectory is going to be your own.
Yeah, I love that. And like what I heard you kind of say there is like you had this part of you that was like soul, like I feel drawn toward this thing. And of course, there's the other part of ourselves. It's the fear, right? It's like, what are people, how can people perceive me? I'm going to look dumb. I'm going to look whatever. And by going back to your chart, you can it almost like confirms the calling a little bit, and it can give you the courage to take that next step toward that calling, is kind of what I heard you say. Do you
Yeah.
have a little time to go over, or how are you on time?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. I just want to ask you a couple more questions. I'm sorry for all the technical delays.
Yeah, that's okay.
So Jules, do you feel like astrology is your soul's purpose?
I think
Like, are
it's
you
certainly a part of it.
okay?
Yeah, it's a part of it. But for me, self-expression, creative self-expression is paramount, and something that I've known it for a long time, but I kind of reached a point this year where I knew that I just needed to start putting my energy towards things that I used to put my energy towards And I guess for the last 4 or 5 years, astrology, and then business sense, like running my own business, became my full creative outlet. This year I've realized, like, no, now I can put really call me. And there's so much life and vitality as well. So it's certainly a part of it. You know, for me, sense is being highly potential. And I guess I want to dig into the paths that I've taken, or leave these kind of maps of my journeys thus far, if that makes sense. Being a part of it. And also it's given me this beautiful freedom to work for myself, that I have, you know, as a mum, and it's brought me so much freedom. And yeah, so it's always, I'm sure I'll always do astrology. You know, I'm so excited about being an old crone and giving, I don't know, maybe 20 readings a year or something, and having a gigantic wait list for it. I think it would be so amazing. I can't wait to know what I'll then, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're just getting started.
Yeah.
So it sounds like astrology is a part of your purpose. The business has been a big way that you've been expressing yourself. And so when you start to feel the nudge toward expressing yourself in a different way, like it sounds like you are, how do you lean on your chart? Or what would your process be for like using your design in the stars, or just even connecting back to your intuition that you know that it's time to evolve?
Yeah. I think it's an inner calling, and I can certainly explain it, how that is in my own node in Leo. I think is a big part of it. I'm moving towards self-expression. And I have always had, I guess it's taking it more seriously, bringing in more of a foundation discipline around it, which is what the 10th house is related to. But yeah, the things that I am putting my energy towards, I have my whole life, but now it's, you know, I I would say since having a child, I would say up until I was a bit of a Peter Pan, you know, it was like I was on a 24-hour cycle. And since having a child, I really am aware of my mortality, which is a great thing. I think about it a lot because it is incredibly motivating me, you know, knowing that I have a finite amount of time as me. There's things that I want to do, and it's almost like it just lights a fire and creates so much drive to do those things, because I think my worst fear is getting to the end and having not done those because I was too scared or too lazy or whatever it might be.
I love that. I think having a healthy relationship with death and just recognizing that none of this is forever can be such a gift to look critically at your life and say, okay, like enough with the BS, enough with the excuses. Let's go, because we just don't know. So yeah, I love that. So going into 2025, I've heard a lot of talk about the age of Aquarius. And I'm just curious if you can give us a little update on what that is, and if there's any other like big astrological events, like top three, that might be happening in the new year.
Yeah, 2020 astrology. So much that it's like everything is changing signs. or, 90% of the solar system is moving and changing signs next year, which is wild.
Wow.
That never happens at the same time. Like all of our transpersonal planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, then our social planets, Jupiter and Saturn, they're all shifting. That's wild. So I would say the feeling is it's a completely new beginning. One of the ways that I've been, I guess, visualizing it, if we're watching a stage play, and it's like this stage play of, let's say, Earth, then next year completely changes. It's a completely
Wow.
new backdrop. And to me, that feels I am an incredibly optimistic man. And to me, it feels very exciting. It feels very fresh. The pace will change a lot as well, because one of the big things that's happening next year is these collective transpersonal planets. They're all shifting from earth signs into fire and air signs, which is great. Well, I like, because if you think about water and earth together, they're very fertile together. They can grow so much together, but it's utilizing, I almost want to say it utilizes earth time. These things can take a long time to be formed or established. The shift into air and fire, that's quick. It's so fast. It's thought into, it's like the idea and hand and then moving forward. So to me, there'll certainly be like this quickening pace, which I think we've sort of felt over, like it really comes on next year. So there's so much happening. I guess the one I'd speak to is there's a shift in the nodes next year, starting in January, actually. By the time you hear this, they will, and they're moving into the south node will move into Virgo, and the north node will move into Pisces, meaning that our eclipses for the next 18 months will be in the signs of Pisces and Virgo. And I'm quite excited about the south node, this sort of unconscious energy moving through Virgo. A better way of saying that, there'll be this release conscious expressions of Virgo, which I'm excited about. I have my moon in Virgo, and to me it feels like already this sense of urgency. It's like everything has to be done now. I have to actualize everything this week, otherwise I'm a failure. The pace is in. Yeah, it's kind of it's bonkers. It's not real. And so I think that's something that we'll really be addressing over the next year and a half. Like I can, if I'm moving diligently towards my desires, and then I have a beautiful chance in getting there. If I'm just going gung ho, then that's stress. Yeah. It already feels this stress that's stored in the body that will have so much more consciousness around releasing and excavating and letting go of. And then with being like the medicine or the antidote in Pisces, that's great. To me, that just feels like we're opening ourselves up to direct experiences where we feel that connectivity like cosmos. Anytime I lie in a hammock and I'm being held and cocooned by something, that has the most incredible effect on my body and my sense of relaxation. So it feels like we're entering an 18-month period where we should all basically be lying in hammocks, or to being in a hammock, being held by something much grander than my to-do list.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I love that. I was laughing with the air and the fire. I have a lot of air and fire in my chart. So the quick transformation. So what I'm hearing is we're gonna have a lot of kind of rapid transformation, big transformation. Fire, such a powerful element, right? And then maybe this
Yeah.
collective conscious awakening around like there's more. We're held by something more. And it's almost like this feeling of like trusting in a divine order and timing so that we can kind of release the pressure and go at our own pace. Is that kind of the energy that's happening at a collective level, or?
Yeah, or I'd even say, like, even how we observatory and you get a glimpse of how gigantic this place is where you live,
Yeah.
that will really kind of relax your sense of my life is my to-do list is everything. You know, by getting a
Oh,
glimpse into the universe, it really kinda gives you a sense of perspective. So I feel like we're opening up
yeah.
to those kind of things more.
I love that. And one thing I just want to note is like what you're talking about here is we're talking about the Earth's birth chart. And so
Mm,
remembering, right? Essentially, eh, like because
yeah, yeah,
like we feel like we as people have birth charts. The Earth has its own birth chart. The United States, Australia has their own birth charts too. So, right, like there's things that are collectively happening in various places,
totally.
and again, like all of that is layered on,
Yeah,
which I thought was interesting.
yeah,
um,
yeah, and even if you think of the last, I don't know, several years, we've had this sense of structures are it feels like structures are destabilizing, or our sense of
yeah.
what society is feels a bit more, I almost see the glitches more. And I think part of what's been almost a little bit disconcerting is that we can't yet see what comes next. And it feels like
Mhm.
next year we're in experimentation phase. It's like there's a lot more room to move and play and try things out and begin things. Whereas it feels like for the last several years, it's almost like we've just been coming to an end point, and now there's fresh juice,
Yeah,
basically.
I love that. I feel it. I'm so ready for 2025. Um, so, I like to end the conversation with what is your truth? Like, what would be your mission statement for life, Jules?
Mm. It's certainly related to curiosity. I think I feel very lucky to be a curious creature, and I want to retain that for my whole life, because I guess part of what I believe is that there's always a lot more than
Mm.
what we know. And I want to be open to life. Yeah, something like that.
Curiosity is such a great like energy, right? Like, let's just get curious about it
Mm.
and see what's behind that door or
I
behind that
think it is.
story.
Yeah. It feels like a fountain of youth. And I don't mean like physical youth, that's
Yeah.
not that important, but just as a creature, as a being, it's important to be alive to life,
Yeah.
which sounds, that's how I'd explain it.
It reminds me of, like, a beginner's mind. Like, let's see
Yeah.
everything through the eyes of, like, I don't really know, and let's explore it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Mm.
So what would be if you could just give us, like, 1 or couple tips, for someone who just feels like a little bit lost and they're trying to understand who they are and what their purpose is. Like, and how would you guide them into using astrology as a tool into self-discovery and purpose?
Mm.
Where would they start?
I'd certainly start by having a reading from they either relate to that astrologer says, like the writing of that astrologer, let's say. I'd stay away from or they've had a word of mouth recommendation. I think that's really important. But then I would recommend outside of their chart that they have some kind of self-reflection practice. To me, it involves having space. You know, I might be walking around the block, no podcasts, not listening to anything, but just being in tune with yourself and giving yourself these pockets of time where you can just check in and see, how do I feel? What do I want? What are is? Because I think, again, what astrology reflects back to you is your natural energy. It's your natural being. Well, it should nurture, but the more that you can get quiet and self-reflect, you'll be tapped into all of it already. It's just there's layers of sound or conditioning that might be in the way there, but you can always access that. Your intuition is always working. The only thing that may need some fine-tuning is your patience or ability to listen to the intel that you're always receiving.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice. And it's like we've always had this knowing inside of us, but many of us, and I'll speak for myself, have been disconnected. And so coming back home to yourself and then almost using astrology as a tool to validate what you already know to be true about yourself, but you just might need like that nudge. But it starts with just the stillness and the quiet and the having that practice. So I love that. Thank you, Jules.
Yeah. And because, oh, my pleasure. Reading someone say, oh, that's not me. It's like, I'm only ever confirming know about themselves. So this information is inherent within them. And I would monitor, like, what are you drawn? It doesn't need to be a why necessarily around it. I'm curious of what draws you, what type of people draw you, what things draw you. You already know.
I already know. It's so true. So hard to trust. I mean, for me, it's been a journey of trusting. So Jules, if people want to connect with you, work with you, where can they find you? What would be the next step there?
I have a website, julesferrari.com. And from there, you can my podcast, my Instagram, and I have, courses. I teach astrology. I read for people. I have classes. You can find everything there, basically.
She also does these really cool, like, you can get your children's chart read. I'm just totally plugging you. And what's the one where you can do a chart with your partner or your husband the composite one? Yeah.
It's synastry. So it's like this chart overlaid. And then it's so I read that for partners, but like business child as well. There's always incredible synastry between a parent and a child, and also partners. It's like there's always very specific things that we're sort of drawn to and playing out with these closest to. And then there's a thing called the composite chart, which is essentially the energy of, or the chart of the actual relationship, which it sounds so trippy, and it's composite. The chart of the relationship is awesome. It's always getting what's essentially, and sometimes that works for both people. Sometimes it's in one person's favor. It's a very interesting area of astrology.
Oh my God, that sounds so cool. I have like 1,000 more questions I want to ask you, but we have to wrap it at some point. Well, thank you so much, Jules. I so appreciate, you sharing all of your wisdom. I feel like this is just a bottomless pit of information and mythology and metaphors that we could dive into, but thank you for being on the show.
My absolute pleasure. And shout out to Barb for connecting
Yes.
us. We love her.
I love it. Okay. Do you have time for me to ask you the mask question or no? Because I totally want to honor your time. We've
Yeah.
already. Okay. Because that's just how I start every episode, but it's been a little glitchy. So, a little rocked off my center. Okay. So, Jules, how I start every single episode here, I'd love to know, what are your masks? And when you take them off, what do you see?
It's such a good question. I've been thinking about this. I think part of what I've worked on a lot is one of those masks. I would say I don't know. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I'd say, speaking, that's our ascendant. It's the socialized self, or it's what's one of the masks, a social mask. And it's not fake, but it's this part of the personality that's interfacing with society.
Yeah.
So it's almost, it could be viewed as a shield, but we'd never really bet from the get-go. It's like, to really know me would be probably to live with me for several years in my house. So I would say, from that standpoint, something that I've really worked on over the last is, I have a Libran ascendant. And so I'm very good at being nice, pleasing, friendly. And those things are true. But what I would say is, I'm to the point where I lost sight of myself, or I would accommodate another person, took away from myself, or may not have been fully true for myself.
Yeah.
And so what I've been doing over the last half is working to be more clear in my communication and direct, build safety around being direct, to build wants and needs and desires forward, rather than purely responding to my environment, but being able to hold myself within my environment and communicate that. And I'd say and I'm sure it's the same for all of us, there's environments where I'm extremely good at doing that and natural at doing that. And then there's others where I've had to do a lot of learning. I'd say in romantic relationships, I can be very adaptable and accommodating. So that's where that work has been. But when I take, I'm me. I have one of those faces where I don't really have a poker face. Whatever I'm feeling, I'm wearing it on my face. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've been thinking about it. I feel like, or at least I've been working a lot towards being me. I think it's natural. Social graces, I think it's important. I value social graces. I value being somewhere on time. I think there's these subtle playing them, then it's like the gears of society and interpersonal relationships work well. I'd say that's very much Libran stuff. It is the social graces. But what I would say is I've probably maybe played those things under. I don't say the thing that I want to say. And then I have this build up of resentment and anger towards somebody.
Yeah.
And I've really been working to eradicate that and just be honest, to not avoid confrontation. Whereas in the past, I'd gladly avoid full stop.
Right. You have no idea how much that just resonated with me as a fellow Libra ascendant, just wanting to keep the harmony. And yeah, taking up that mask is just like, all right, love me, or leave me. I'm safe and worthy. And like, here I am. Yeah. But it's tricky. It's really tricky. So I love that.
It is. And I think, at least astrologically speaking, it's an area that we've put forward to accommodate our early childhood and socialization. So it's this entities that help us,
Yeah.
and we can really be valued to them as well. So it's, I think a lot of what I talk to clients about is like having to build the safety or show yourself that it's safe to do whatever the thing may be. For us having Libran ascendants, it's like starting small. If we order a coffee and we get the wrong order, it's going up and saying, "Hey, sorry, that's not what I ordered." It's meeting confrontation in small ways rather than being like, "Oh, well, I could just drink this thing that I don't want to drink." Don't do that, like adults. So yeah, it's because there's been this early value or survival need for us to be particular. It takes a lot of conscious work to rewrite those things. So, for example, for what you were saying that happened during your nodal return, that's yourself, that you're of value to yourself enough that you can have the things that you want and you can be who you are.
Yeah.
You don't learn that that's a life lesson.
Absolutely. And but I leaned on the stars, like not entirely, but they were another modality that I used to just trust that what I felt inside was like, I need to choose me. And it's part of my path. And the reason why I've been in this relationship is because he's part of my initiation. Right? Like, it's not, the universe is going to send me someone that's not meant for me so that I can choose myself. Right. And then learn that lesson. And then it's like on to the next. And so, yeah, learning how not to hold other people's disappointment as a Libra is hard.
Yeah. And I think also to just, how you are, so if I'm not feeling it, if asks me how are you today, I'm not going to say I'm good, how are you? It's more, I'll be more honest. Obviously there's a time and a place for those kind of things, but I don't have to be likable all of the time to be likable. Actually, and what I like about people is people who are very honest and transparent, because there's so much safety being around people who do the things that they say they do. So I don't have to double guess or interpret everything or being hyper vigilant to my environment. So I love people who are direct. And so even and who are happy, who live, these really interesting, beautiful lives, has shown me that that's also possible for me by being honest and by being direct. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Thank goodness for those those role models who, paint a new image and a new archetype of what safety can look like by simply being yourself. And that's, what this podcast is about, about truth and, realizing that you can ruffle some feathers and still be worthy and safe and totally loved. We don't have to bend all the time, even though bending and social graces are, like you said, like super important and there's a time and a place, but your existence doesn't depend upon that.
Yeah. Totally. And I think it's like with that Libran energy, it's by me being able to hold myself and not abandon myself, I've developed so much more self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's that. It's like, well, I'd rather be in relationship with myself than lose myself to appease somebody else. I never,
yeah. Or a lifetime, which is like so scary to think about. I was like, not happening.
No.
Oh my gosh. Well, we could jam on astrology for days. I'm going to come and get another reading with you soon. I want to do the children's one. But thank you. Thank you so much for listening in to It's Just Me, Emily. I hope that you enjoyed the show. If you did, it would be a great honor if you could subscribe and then leave a review. And if you do so, I will send you a beautiful hardback copy of my book, Love and Grief, to the first 20 people who subscribe and leave a review. When you do that, it just helps my podcast get boosted and more people will be able to come in and view the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in another episode.